The Chicago Bulls find themselves in the worst possible spot in the Eastern Conference. No, they're not dead last, although given their aims for the rest of the season, they would have loved to be 15th in their conference. The Bulls are 11th, 3 wins off the 6th place New York Knicks, and they're going nowhere. That's why a rebuild seems to be on the cards, so let's look at why the organization could blow it all up.
But first, a reminder about our brand new giveaway. We're giving away a PS5 with a copy of NBA 2K22 and Madden 22. All you have to do is watch the full video, leave a like, comment the keyword hidden in the video, and make sure you're subscribed. It's that simple.
Starting with the Bulls close to blowing their roster up. The Chicago Bulls are one of the unluckiest teams over the course of the last year or so. Only 1 year back, after 28 games played, they were sitting pretty at the top in the Eastern Conference with a 17-10 record, and while there were doubts over the trio of DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and Lonzo Ball, it was somehow working out well. And then with Lonzo Ball getting his meniscus torn, their season went to the dogs. Everything went south, and a year later, Chicago seemed to be planning a rebuild because nothing is working out for them. The chemistry between the players is weak, and the front office wouldn't mind a complete rebuild at this stage either. But what are the reasons behind a potential rebuild? How did they get to this point? Is there any turning back? What players are tradable, and which ones might end up staying in Chicago? And how will the Bulls go about their business? Let's take a look at all of these details. First things first, why are the Bulls considering a rebuild? Well, earlier this season, it was revealed the Chicago Bulls were actually the most depressing team in the NBA. It's been a long time coming, considering Michael Jordan sold his soul to the devil for those 6 rings, but since then, Chicago hasn't experienced much success. The Lonzo Ball problem. But now their current roster has been riddled with massive injuries. The Lonzo Ball situation is a terrible one for them because, let's be honest, that injury isn't going away anytime soon. It has probably taken some years off Ball's future and also delayed his progress to reaching the level he was once capable of. Not to mention, he's a pretty decent player and was supposed to be the cornerstone of the Bulls' new look, but for now, he just seems like a liability because of that injury. He was expected to be with the roster for preseason, but now we're nearly halfway through the season, and there's still no timescale on his return to action. But also, it's not just about this injury. The second pick of the 2017 draft is just not offered what the Bulls were expecting from him when they got him from the Pelicans, and who knows how long Chicago will wait for him to truly take off. Even when fit, Ball struggles to post decent numbers considering his career PPG is under 12. That's not too bad, but for someone considered to be a cornerstone for a franchise, it's just not good enough. And anyone would tell you in the NBA, availability remains your best ability. For Ball, though, he's never managed more than 63 games in a season and has appeared on the court a total of 35 times since making the switch from New Orleans. Also, the trouble with Zach LaVine. Another player who the Bulls had really high expectations from was Zach LaVine. Hell, they even gave him a supermax deal in the offseason, but let's just say that too hasn't worked out as well as Chicago's front office would have wanted. Don't get us wrong, he's averaging nearly 22 points and his shooting has been healthy too, but he doesn't come across as the player who can take the Bulls to the next level. At best, the current version of LaVine seems fit to only play as a second superstar on the roster, and the Bulls don't have a primary one. His shooting, which is above average, is still a bit of a concern. Teams expect more from their shooting guards, and there's a reason to believe the coaching staff isn't too happy with the way LaVine has carried the offense. That's why he's been benched on some occasions and taken off at crucial stages of games too, which indicates that there are growing structural issues within the organization. Billy Donovan just isn't convinced with LaVine, and despite his recent performances yielding better returns, they still are much lower than what he's been offering since the 2018 season in Chicago. Not to mention the absurd decision-making with trades. While you can't blame the front office for Ball and LaVine's performances this season, there's reason to believe the front office has to share some blame for the state the Bulls are in. That's because, let's not forget, the Bulls traded Wendell Carter Jr. and Otto Porter Jr. along with 2 first-round picks to get their hands on Nikola Vucevic, someone we'll get to later in this video. The problem with that trade was the fact that the Bulls let go of 2 first-round picks along with 2 very reliable options. One of those picks turned out to be Franz Wagner, who has been in sensational form since joining the NBA. How can you do that? The trades for Wendell Carter Jr. and Otto Porter Jr. also made no sense whatsoever. Carter hasn't exactly exploded since moving to Orlando, but he could have been a really good addition to this current Bulls team. Similarly, Otto Porter Jr. would go on to become a serious part of the Warriors organization that won the NBA championship last season, and instead, the Bulls believed in getting Vucevic, followed by aging superstars. This is another massive problem for Chicago and another reason why they shouldn't even be thinking about salvaging this season. 2 of the leading names on their roster are DeMar DeRozan and Nikola Vucevic. Their collective age is 65, and that's certainly not the kind of player with whom you can aim to think big in the future. In fact, Arthur Karnisovas should be doing all he can to ensure that DeRozan and Vucevic are off before the trading deadline, probably even before that, so the Bulls can also think about tanking. DeRozan is a reliable scorer, but he's a very limited player and tends to shut down during the playoffs, which is basically a reason to offload him while his stock is still high. The same stands true for Vucevic, who can probably offer more in the playoffs, but for now, the Bulls have no reason for filling their rosters with such players when there isn't anything left to fight for. Luckily for them, there are plenty of desperate franchises looking to make a deal, and if Karnisovas can find picks in return for those two, he shouldn't think twice before sending them on their merry way. Moving on, the Bulls can't compete in the East. The biggest reason for pulling the plug on this current season is the fact that this Chicago team can't go very far. So even if Ball returns and starts firing from the very first minute, LaVine finds his touch, and DeRozan along with Vucevic contributes, chances are the Bulls won't make it to the playoffs. The East is stacked with contenders, and while the top 5 teams in the division won't be getting displaced anytime soon, there are others like the Atlanta Hawks, the New York Knicks, the Heat, the Raptors, and even the Pacers, who are all well placed with better rosters to edge ahead in the race for the playoffs and of course the play-ins too. But let's just say the Bulls do make it to the playoffs, they won't be going far. If their plan is just to make it to the first round, then sure, go ahead. However, there's no way this Bulls roster can defeat any of the Bucks, the Celtics, the Nets, the 76ers, or the Cavs over 7 games. In fact, they'd be lucky to get more than a win from those 7 games. For the Bulls, don't look up is good advice. As far as the Bulls are concerned, a 13-18 record is still bad enough to remain in contention for tanking. It would get even worse, read better, if Chicago were to trade the likes of DeRozan and Vucevic, because then they'll get weaker and could easily slip below Orlando and Washington. But to fall below the Hornets and the Pistons would truly take some doing, but we won't put it past this Chicago team if they are motivated enough to tank, because if there's one thing they do well, it's losing. We're sorry. Up next, players to trade and not to trade. Ultimately, it's a decision for the front office, but also one that they'll need to be very careful about. As far as we're concerned, Vucevic, Goran Dragic, and DeRozan should be leaving immediately. Ball and LaVine are tougher decisions, but the Bulls need to decide if it's worth rebuilding with those 2 players on the roster. Do they still believe in Lonzo? Can Zach turn into an even better shooting guard and take over the primary star role for the Bulls? The 2 players we wouldn't think about trading at all are Ayo Dosunmu and Alex Caruso. Both are fantastic, and Caruso in particular is one they should keep around if they want to challenge next season. Lastly, is tanking the best idea for the Bulls? Once they decide the players they need to keep, then they should go all out in their race to the bottom. If they can sneak in one of the lottery positions, the Bulls would fancy their chances like the other sides of landing the first pick. In case they miss out on it, there's still hope, because the likes of Scoot Henderson and Nick Smith and more are still very good players who can improve the Bulls almost immediately once they come in. And if they decide to trust LaVine and Ball beyond the season and ideally add Wembanyama, then suddenly Chicago would be the most optimistic place to be. Let's be honest, if you've got a fully fit Lonzo Ball along with Zach LaVine firing on all cylinders, helped by Alex Caruso, all playing around a certain Victor Wembanyama, you'd fancy your chances of becoming contenders immediately too. But for that to happen, the Bulls need to decide fast. That's a wrap for this video. Do you agree that blowing it all up and tanking is the way to go for the Bulls? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this, and we'll see you in the next one.